All right, I see many of you joined. So again, a warm welcome to the latest trends in image alteration and duplication webinar. My name is Joris Verrossum. I'm with STM, and STM is the Global Association of Scientific, Technical and Medical Publishers. Before we start, STM is committed to complying with applicable competition antitrust law. So please refrain from disclosing or asking about competitively sensitive information. If you believe any such information is being disclosed or sought, please interrupt to point out your objections and to request that such activity be stopped and leave the webinar if it does not. So this webinar is an initiative of the STM Image Alteration and Duplication Working Group, and you see some of the members all the members on the screen, and some of them will present to you as well. And the working group is part of the STM Integrity Hub, which is a collaborative initiative to equip the scholarly communication community with data, intelligence, and technology to protect research integrity. And of course, image play a very important role in that. So one of the things we do is creating a resource center. So we have a specific page where you can find more information about the activities of this group. Again, here is the URL. On this page, you can find instructional videos, recommendations and guidelines, and an overview of tools that can assist you in checking incoming manuscripts. The latest video was produced a few weeks ago and published. You can find it on the website, and it was created by Jana Christopher, who I'll give now the word to for the next step in this webinar. Thank you. And I think you're muted, Jana.
Great start. Thank you. So thanks for your introduction and for providing some context. So my name is Jana Christopher. I'm honored to be chairing the STM working group on image alteration and duplication. I'm the data integrity analyst at the Federation of European Biochemical Societies, and I'm also a freelance consultant for the Royal Society. My work in image integrity goes back about 15 years. Image integrity in scientific publications, surprisingly, was largely dismissed by journals until about 20 years ago, because it was supposed that cheating and fabricating results was extremely rare in science, and that any aberrations that did come to light must be accidental or just genuine mistakes. In more recent years, and especially with the alarming exposure of paper mills and the exponential rise in retractions, the community appears to have somewhat lost its innocence in this respect and has started to focus more. It is now widely recognized that image problems are a potential indicator of illegitimate scientific conduct. And so conscientious journals and publishers have developed strategies and workflows to check for this, and automated screening tools have started to appear. In today's webinar, we will look at the latest trends in image alteration duplication, some of the available tools and strategies to detect issues pre- and post-publication, and discuss what we will need going forward, also in anticipation of generative AI being applied to fabricate images. I'm delighted to introduce our panel of experts today, who will each give a short presentation drawing on their experience as data integrity specialists. This will be followed by a summary of the results from the survey on image integrity that some of you kindly responded to. Please type any questions that arise in the Q&A, and we will address and discuss as many of them as possible after we've heard from our panelists. First, it's my pleasure to present Mike Rosner. He will introduce himself, but I'd just like to point out that Mike was something of a pioneer back in the early 2000s, installing routine pre-publication image screening at the Journal of Cell Biology, long before anything similar was done by other journals. Mike also published an influential paper in JCB together with Ken Yamada, What's in a Picture? The Temptation of Image Manipulation, which has cited nearly 350 times and has been really influential. Mike will give us an overview of his experience on the investigation side. Over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Thanks, Jana. Have you got my slides?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody, from very dark San Francisco. And I want to thank Jana for the invitation to join this panel and for the kind introduction. As Jana mentioned, my name is Mike Rossner. I am a consultant about image manipulation in biomedical research through my company, Image Data Integrity. I've done that for the last 10 years. For 10 years before that, I was the managing editor of Journal of Cell Biology, where, as Jana mentioned, I implemented the first image screening program in 2002. And then I was the publisher of JCB for 7 years more after that as the director of Rockefeller University Press. In my current work, it mostly involves evaluating the merits of allegations of image manipulation for various entities. And that's primarily for academic institutions carrying out their own investigations of their own people, so carrying out their own internal investigations. And that experience leads me to latest trend number 1, which I actually number 0 because it doesn't involve any change or development. And that is that in the types of investigations that I'm doing, I am seeing the same types of duplications and manipulations that I've been seeing for the last 20 years. These are manipulations in the same image types, blots, micrographs, etc. Same duplication types, direct duplications, altered duplications with flips, rotations, etc. Same manipulation types, splices, copy paste, etc. And most common one, same inconsistencies between control and experimental blots. One is spliced, one's not spliced, so the control is invalid. So that hasn't changed. But what has changed, and I now call it latest trend number 1, is the increase in the number of allegations of image manipulation over time, especially over the last 10 years. And there's a number of factors that are causing that increase. First is the increase in the number of articles published per year, especially low-quality articles published by predatory publishers. Second is the advent of anonymous public commenting. This isn't actually all that new. PubPeer came online a dozen years ago now in 2012. Third is the increase in the number of people scouring the published literature for image manipulation. These are so-called image sleuths. The most prominent and prolific of these is Elizabeth Bick. Fourth is the increase in the accuracy of those allegations. Gone are the bizarre allegations that we used to get in the early days of Claire Francis. Most of what I see now, most of the allegations I see now have merit, the vast majority. And then finally, the use of software lowers the entry bar for sleuthing. It used to require some visual skill to be able to pick these things up. Now all you have to do is upload a PDF, and anybody who can do that can become an image sleuth. So this increase in the number of allegations has led to our latest trend number 2, which is an increased awareness of a problem. And this increased awareness is, there we go, is amongst all stakeholders in the publication process. And one would hope that awareness amongst these stakeholders who are upstream of the actual publication date would reduce the number of images, of manipulated images getting into publication. But at least currently, the balance is still on this side. Latest trend number 3, the use of generative AI to fabricate data. As we all know, generative AI has just exploded in the last year. In fact, it's 1 year to almost to the day that Adobe introduced generative AI for Photoshop. So the burning question right now is, how big is the problem? And the fairly unsatisfactory answer is, we don't know, because we don't know what we're missing. I think the only thing we do know for sure is that it will get worse. Here's an example that came out, was posted on Twitter in the week that Adobe introduced generative AI for Photoshop. And here's the before image, here's the after image, and the person who did this used generative AI in Photoshop to remove that band there. Now, I can't pick that visually, and that scares me. I don't know if there are now algorithms that can pick that. What I could pick visually was the fact that these bands and these bands were duplicated down here with just a change in exposure, and that was not mentioned by the person who did this generative AI. Latest trend number 4 is the elephant in the room, and that is paper mills. I have to say, I have not personally encountered paper mills in the type of work that I do working for investigative committees. They have just not hit that stage in the publication process or in the investigation process. So I'll leave the discussion of paper mills to the other folks on the panel who are dealing with that problem every day. And the final latest trend is the development of algorithms for the detection of image manipulation. This is a series of algorithms that have come online, mostly within the last 5 years. Most of them detect image duplication. And one of the appropriate uses for algorithms in detection, well, I think they're appropriate for systematic image screening, where speed and scale are paramount. In my opinion, though, they're inappropriate for evaluating allegations of image manipulation, where accuracy is paramount. These algorithms are still just missing too much to be used in evaluating allegations. Here's an example that Elizabeth Bick tweeted a little while ago now, about 1.5 years ago, where an author tried to dismiss an allegation of image duplication using software, where in the image, the duplications were completely evident visually. So if you are going to use algorithms for detecting image manipulation, it is important to know their limitations. First, what do they detect? What types of duplications do they detect? Do they detect duplications within an article or between articles? What type of manipulations do they detect? And then, very importantly, how good are they at detecting those things? What percentage of things that you can pick up visually are actually picked up by the algorithm? And that information is vital to be able to make a decision about using these algorithms, because you have to understand how high your tolerance is for missing things. Is your tolerance 50%? If the software misses 50%, is that okay with you? What about if it misses 70%? What about if it misses 90%? The only way you can know that number is by determining this for yourself. What percentage of things is the software detecting relative to visual screening? And this is my favorite example of image manipulation. Simple contrast adjustment shows a nice splice here, a nice copy paste here, and even wholesale erasing here. Software does not pick that up. That's important for you to keep in mind if you're using that software. Thanks very much.
You're muted, Jana.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mike, very much for your insights. That was really interesting. We're going to carry on without delay, and our next panelist is Jenny Crick, who works in the integrity and ethics team at the Canadian Science Publishing, and she will share her experience of establishing a new image integrity team and workflow. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Are you guys seeing my slides? Okay, perfect. Okay, so hi, I'm Jenny Crick. I'm an editorial outreach specialist and I work at Canadian Science Publishing. We're a fairly small publisher. We have 55 people and we publish 22 journals across a range of STEM topics. That's everything from cell biology to engineering. And I'm part of our fairly fledgling integrity department for the company, which has only existed for about 1.5 years. We're a team of 3, which I think divided by 22 journals is a pretty small team. And our team has a really complementary mix of publishing and science expertise. My coworker Mel has 24 years of experience in peer review and scientific publishing. So she comes to the role with a really strong foundation in publication ethics and rigor in peer review. Lucy comes from a background in biomedical and clinical research, and my own background is in molecular biology research. When we launched our integrity department last year, we were basically starting from scratch. We started by getting a handle on some of the tools that are out there to analyze images. We started in GIMP, which is a freeware version of Photoshop, and then eventually moved on to Photoshop proper and learned to use the ORI tools that are available for that program. As we were learning to use Photoshop to analyze images, we definitely relied on the STM videos, as well as just general photo editing tutorials that are out there, not from an integrity angle, but helped us understand what the different parts of the program were actually doing. We knew we had quite a backlog of post-publication investigations to do, thanks to PubPeer, and so that's where we started. We used our PubPeer comments as a sort of training ground because we essentially had a perfectly labeled set of data from integrity sleuths that we could learn on by validating that we could find the issues we already knew were in the figures and images. So this helped us really figure out our own investigative techniques, and it also helped us recognize what patterns we were seeing in terms of which types of images often hid issues, and also how best to pursue retractions with our editors on the basis of image problems. As we got more confident with our skills, it was then a matter of expanding that activity and trying to find things on our own. We were also starting to integrate what we'd learned into more proactive systems to screen content before it was being accepted, as well as always trying to keep up with what is a really ever-changing game, because image manipulation seems to only be getting more advanced. So we've been trying to get better at dealing with trends like cross-publication duplication and AI-generated images. We also rely on people in our editorial offices to scan for other signs of paper mills. And so the volume of submissions can make this challenging, but that's one way that we help ourselves and we get help from our team. And we also have maybe a unique workflow in the sense that we need to communicate our findings to the editors who have the final say on what gets rejected, retracted, or accepted. So we have a step of collecting and presenting our evidence to our editors-in-chief, which can add challenge at times during investigations. Most recently, we've been developing a policy that requires raw blot and gel data at the time of submission for any papers that contain blots or gels in their figures, and we're hoping that this will help us catch issues upstream of the peer review process. So far, data integrity has really felt like a sort of uncharted water, and so launching our systems to check figures has really been a process of, I would say, trial and error and collaborating with the teams at other publishers to figure out what skills and tools we really have. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jenny, for these insights, which I'm sure some of our audience will recognize from their own experience if they're a little bit newer to this whole chapter. We will now hear from Eric Pezzanelli. His role is publisher for art at the American Physiological Society, and Eric also oversees internal procedures to address figure manipulation. He will share with us a more established view, and he will also focus on automated detection tools. Thank you, Eric.
All right. Are we seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So I've been with the APS Art Department for 32 years, and we publish 14 journals in-house, and not quite as many as Jenny, but I have a staff of 3 digital arts specialists. None of us have science backgrounds. We're all trained in graphic arts, but we've been screening figures for manipulation for the last 15 years. We review figures after acceptance, but before export into production, and our accepted manuscripts drop into a queue for review, and the assigned art specialist reviews the figures. If they pass, they move to export. If there are issues, then they are moved to a holding folder, and our findings documentation is sent to our ethics manager. So ethics manager is trained PhD in physiology, so we have in-house expertise to bounce problems off of, since we don't have the background. So for us, review begins right through the browser of the merged PDF from our submission system. We've found at this point that most image manipulation is done poorly and not with the intent to deceive, so it's often visible to the naked eye if you just zoom in, and we refer to these as presentation errors because the authors were not aware that they should not do that. Almost always, though, the review moves offline and the manuscript files are downloaded. We ask that our authors upload publication quality figures at first revision, so we at least hope to have the highest quality or high quality images to review and publish. We ask for the standard files that everybody does, TIFF, EPS, and PDF, but we also take native Illustrator and even PowerPoint files. And the file type determines where the figure review starts and what application we begin with. We kind of push our authors for combination files, vector with embedded raster, just to have higher quality images. But so we may start our review in Acrobat or Illustrator or PowerPoint, where we can pull apart figures and sometimes do a select all. And if you have a gel that's made of two pieces, you've got splicing, or at least you can start there, but you can't stop there. And everything always ends up in Photoshop for us. That's where we end all our review, or where most of the reviewing takes place. There are many adjustment tools in Photoshop, and you don't have to be a power user to inspect images. You can pretty quickly use simple adjustment tools such as levels or brightness. We saw that in Mike's presentation, how quickly you can, with just a simple movement of a slider in one of the adjustment tools, can reveal a lot of things going on in an image. And then, of course, we've been using for almost the whole time the tools offered by the Office of Research Integrity. These are tools, actions, Photoshop actions or droplets that you can download from their site. That also includes useful gradient maps for in Photoshop. And these are custom. You can customize them as you use them. They stop and explain what the next step is going to be, and they allow you to make changes to the default settings as you go. You can run them in part or in full, alone, or in conjunction with others. Most of these tools use false coloring of, gradient maps are great for grayscale images, recoloring the gray pixels with color to really bring out the detail, like say in blots, to a higher degree of detail, making it much easier to spot manipulations, things that just shouldn't be natural, hard edges, 90-degree angles, straight lines, things that don't usually occur in nature. But unfortunately, by nature, Photoshop is geared more towards the manipulation side than the detection side. And we could all use a little help. And that help may come from some of these new automation tools that are out there. Without going specifically into any one of them, some of the positive takeaways are, that they're either web-based or offer APIs which can be plugged into your workflow at whatever stage you think is best for you. And they will work with you on that. There are simple drag and drop interfaces where you can drag, a single PDF or multiple files and then let it process. They all, to certain degrees, have the ability to check against large databases. They may be ones that they're creating on their own from their users. There's ones that reach out to like PubMed and even bioRxiv, or they allow you to create your own repositories, whether individual or for a lab or even for an institution. And most of them are very quick. They can be costly. So on the less positive side, I put a plus or minus here, so that they're mostly primarily focused on duplication. For me, that's kind of a plus and a minus, because there's so much more out there going on in figures. But one of the hardest things to do is for someone looking at images is looking for duplication when you've got 8 figures in a single paper with 20 Western blots, with each one with 3 lanes, so they almost look identical at first glance anyway, and then you have to look at all of those pages against each other. So there may be a concentration of duplication, but that's kind of it's something that's pretty big to take off your plate. Like I said, they can be costly. Some charged by the image or sub-image, others charged by the scan. And of course, the more you scan, the less cost per scan. And most offer different levels of usage, whether they be individual, multi-user, or even enterprise levels of usage. Some may require some data curation, either to control costs, cut down on false positives, or to reduce file sizes for easier upload and faster processing. Some allow you to actually do that data curation once you've actually uploaded and before they analyze. So there's some nice features built into these. And then there's inconsistent results, which we've talked about, things being missed. Sometimes some very obvious duplications. Some are not very good with duplications that are flipped and rotated. So what that kind of comes down to is that somebody needs to be sitting in the chair. You can't just let them run and accept the results. You have to have somebody who's trained or has an understanding to actually go through the results. And so, kind of to summarize, for an experienced integrity specialist or an established program, I definitely think there's the potential there to really provide help by reducing the time spent reviewing, certainly when it comes to duplications across, just within a single paper or across publications. And especially with reporting the findings, I find that takes a lot of time as to, you go through all that time to find the manipulation, but then you have to create a report, or I create a report for my ethics manager, and that takes a lot of time. So it's hard. It's easier to remove from a report that's created for you than to build one from scratch. I find, and certainly for a new program, it would be a great starting point. Depending on who's going to be doing the looking. If you got new people. I've talked to people from smaller publishers where they're like, "Oh, I work in peer review and I've never looked at images, and they just gave me Photoshop, and I'm supposed to look at this now, and I don't know what I'm doing." So it could be a good starting point for a new program. But I would say to look into these companies, contact them, see about starting a trial with them. That benefits all. You can see what they have to offer and how they perform, and they will gain insight into our needs and how to improve their product. And just for a couple of extra alternative tools that are free, ImageJ is a free Java-based app, so it runs on any platform. Again, it's a drag and drop interface. If you download and add in the InspectJ plugin, it's an almost automatic process. It can find splicing, cloning, erasures, and duplications. I'm just started using it, so I won't say much more than that. And as far as there's a site called Forensically, it's a website / online tool. It can be used offline as well, where you can upload a single image at a time. And it has a lot of tools. The creator has a nice video on YouTube that explains how the tools work and what they're doing, which is helpful. I do find that a lot of these don't get a lot of great instruction, but so there's a lot of things to look into and consider.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Yep.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much for that. I just want to remind people, if you have any questions, do type them into the Q&A, so that we can pick out some after we're done with our talks. So our last presentation comes from Greta Sharp. Greta is a research integrity specialist with the Springer Nature Research Integrity Group. She will focus on raw data and also talk about the emergence of fake scientific images that can be created with generative AI. Thank you, Greta.
Thank you, Jana. Hi, I'm Greta. As Jana mentioned, I'm the research integrity specialist at Springer Nature, working with data and image manipulation. So I'm mostly focusing currently on raw data checks for articles that have been flagged as potentially problematic. And what I have noticed happening with raw data is that the tools and services for altering or fabricating data are increasingly accessible. People know how to use Photoshop to an extent. People know how to do things. It's getting easier and more user-friendly. And that results in more both intentional attempts to mislead, but also authors semi-innocently altering things because they want the data to look pretty. What I've also noticed is that paper mills have been producing overwhelming amounts of data in response to publishers asking authors who use paper mill services to provide the full raw data from all repeats of the experiment. They can now provide these. So the data not being there is no longer that much or that frequent an occurrence. And I've had some very interesting responses to my requests that authors provide raw data. The most common one is that they provide the data embedded in PDFs and Word documents, PowerPoint slides, anything but raw data. So all the metadata is lost, that there is nothing that can help me validate the data in terms of whether it actually was whether the images were actually captured at the time when the experiments happened. The excuse that I also get a lot is that the images, the exact images that were used in the figure have been lost, but there are alternative repeats from the same experiment. And I genuinely don't understand who keeps 2 out of 3 replicas of an experiment, but there we have it. More recently, I have received proofing reports from authors saying, here is a report. Clearly, there is no duplication in our data, which I think has been mentioned already. This is not good enough for validating the data because proofing, some other software allows the person investigating the article to remove the images that they don't want checked, which completely destroys the purpose. For Western blots, I sometimes receive image J-pixel density analysis where authors say, look, there are different pixels between these 2 blots, so they absolutely can't be the same. Again, this does not stand in for raw data. And there's other non-verifiable information. The example on the screen currently is where I have told authors that I could not, well, that the metadata in their images said that the images were created in 2024 for a very old article. And they sent me this screenshot saying, no, the image was created in 2004. But if you look at the modification dates that I have translated into English, one of them says it was modified Friday, 21st of May, 2004 at 11:44. But the one at the top gives away that according to that computer, today is Friday, 21st of May, 2004, but the screenshot was captured in 2024. So not great. Another fun example that I just wanted to share is where I received these blots from 2 different author groups and for unrelated investigations, and they share exactly the same background. So just the fact that the raw data exists, again, does not necessarily mean that it is correct and does not need further checking. And now on to AI, the question of the year. And Jana, our chair, has kindly produced some images for us. So the image on the left is the image as it appears in an article, and the image on the right is what could be perceived as raw data. It is an extended image created to show a larger field, but it is created by Photoshop 24. And just by looking at it, it is impossible to tell that there is a difference. And I have a few more examples. So this one is just, again, expanded, but it is a bit more obvious. So I have zoomed in on the image, and the green arrows show where the resolution changes going from the original part of the image into the the AI generated one. And the orange arrows show areas that are not quite cells. So an expert in the relevant field would be able to see this and say that these are not cells, but it does require more expertise now. And I have some other examples, so I can just show them quickly, and then we'll come back if there's time at the end. Again, a Western blot at the top and an AI-generated extended version to imitate raw data for this, and another version to imitate more raw data, which, when solarized, actually reveals that there is a difference. But again, a less experienced person or someone just quickly skimming through the data would not be able to notice this. And again, same here. They look like blots, and this will be a problem. And just to end on a more positive note, what we want to see when we ask for raw data and why. So usually high quality TIFF images can be enough for validation, just to make sure that there's no obvious manipulation, and the images have to have relevant metadata. So the creation date has to be before submission, and ideally they would have camera or scanner information. Even better is original microscopy formats. There are loads of them now, and they have even more details, such as where the image is taken in terms of the actual microscope slides, what lasers were used for confocal microscopy, all of that. And it can be analyzed in ImageJ, which is free and available online if you can't download software on your work computer. Then the interesting new thing is that laboratory equipment now can include fingerprints in the data that can be verified later on. And the same providers also provide the software to verify it. And anyone who has the raw data file can verify it using that software. But the fingerprint is only present in the original file. So once it is converted into a figure, it would not be able to say that it is the same file. And another frequently manipulated file type is, or not file type, data type is flow cytometry, which usually comes in PDFs. So this, you can ask the authors for different types of PDFs or the original FCS files, which again you can verify online, analyze online, sorry. And for Western blots, we always want full gel images, no cropping, and it usually requires several attempts to explain to the authors what full gel images mean and what no cropping means. And again, going back to the example shown previously, even if the full gel images exist, please stay vigilant. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Greta, for these sobering insights. And yeah, I think it's good to see how vigilant you are in your department. So now, before we turn to some of the questions that have started to appear in the Q&A, very good, I would like to thank all of you who took the time to answer the survey that we put together, and we will take a few minutes for Joris to present the results. Joris,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. So we sent a survey to you, to all the people participating, but also to some screening experts, and I will try to go through the answers relatively quickly. First question was, at what stage in the process do you screen for image integrity issues? We see two groups of people, one that's the screen at submission, but also quite a few that do it after acceptance when approached with an issue. Another question was, what types of images do you screen? And you can see here the distribution between the various options we gave. There were also some people that gave their own answers, the spectra, Kaplan-Meier curves, other graphs and plots, and the M is actually the MWM swimming traces. If you're able to share statistics on 1% of submitted manuscripts, does your organization identify problems? Results here, 0 to 20%, 60.9%, and 20 to 40% is 20 over 25%. Question: in the process of investigation, do you ask for raw data? Raw data came up frequently in the discussions today. So that is almost always, or almost always. In what % of cases do you request raw data? When you ask for raw data, is this data unavailable, inadequate, or problematic? Distribution here. 80% of respondents answered that in 0 to 20% of the cases, they lead to institutional investigations. Obviously also depends on at what stage and what prompted the investigation by the integrity experts. Were you aware of the STM guidelines for handling integrity issues? You can find it under the link, but it's also on the resource page. So it's always good to see that 80% was aware of the guidelines, and also over 80% have adopted them. So that is great news of the people that were aware of them. Do you publish details of the issues identified when you correct or retract a paper? Most of the respondents do. And then the question around AI, generative AI. Have you encountered any AI-generated images interesting? About 25% said yes, 36% said no, but actually most of you answered, I suspect so, but was unable to prove conclusively determine, as I think we also saw by the examples we saw today, very difficult to prove and to detect these. The last question we asked, is there anything else you would like to improve or facilitate? I highlighted some of the answers here that we also heard today. Quite some questions about raw data, cross-publisher image repository, collaboration with institutions, an interesting one. Recommendations on what can be corrected or should be retracted. Just go through one or two more slides. Raw data, again, shared resources. And shared image repository is also something that came up in our discussions frequently. Again, raw data and data storage. And the last set of slides, mandatory access to original unprocessed image data sets, again, the raw data. So thank you very much for filling it in, and I'll give the words to Jan.
Okay. Thank you, Joris. Well, I think that is quite interesting. And I look forward to hearing what our audience and the panel think of these results. So maybe I can just ask you guys, is there anything that you found interesting, that you found noteworthy? Maybe I'll start with Eric.
Well, I think like everybody, I'm worried about AI, and
Yeah.
And you know, it's difficult enough already as it is without having that thrown in on top. Like I said, with the Photoshop is, it's made for manipulating photos, and it's just too easy. I know there was a question about now I don't remember. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but
That's all right.
Feel free to go to somebody else who probably has a question or something.
Yes, that's fine, of course, sure. Greta, can you maybe sort of let us know about the survey? Was there anything that you found noteworthy, that you found surprising, maybe? Any comments?
Yes, I was, well, sort of surprised, not fully surprised, that most of the respondents only check the images that are easy to check, but are actually picked up by the software, the automated tools. But there doesn't seem to be much looking into other types of data. which I think is worth paying attention to.
Yes, that's right. I noticed that too. That's very true. So any kind of spectra, bar graphs, these kind of things tend to be ignored, and that's mirrored by the tools. That's right. Mike, anything that struck you?
Oh, yeah, and specifically in relating to the things that I do now with the institutional investigations. Joris, can you put the slides up again? I don't remember what slide number it was. 6 or 7, something like that, about the institutional investigations. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at a slide like this, it's sort of the upstream questions are the ones that I would be interested in from the publishers. First, what's the policy for reporting? How do you decide something's bad enough to report? And then the number that's actually reported. So, this is the number that's leading to institutional investigations. And I wonder, what percentage of what gets reported leads to an institutional investigation? That's the question that would be interesting to me.
Yes.
The other thing that struck me is these 4 publishers or these 4 responders who got a 40 to 60% response from institutions to actually start investigations. I'd love to know who those are. That seems absolutely remarkable to me, that anyone is getting that kind of response out of an institution, especially now having experience on that side of the equation, and knowing how difficult it is to move an institution into an investigation.
Yes.
I'd love to know who those 4 people are.
I have a suspicion, sorry, Mike, to interrupt. I have a suspicion that, sometimes there might be several cases of one, of an author group that have several papers that are being flagged, and that tends to trigger an investigation. And if you're part of, if your journal has one of those papers, has published 1 or 2 of those papers, then of course you're more likely to receive a response from the Institute. That's just something that I thought might be the case. We're a bit short on time, and I would like to take some of these questions that have come in from the audience. There was more of a comment than a question. The problem with some online image duplication detection tools is that they only have access to OA, of open access or free access articles for comparison, obscuring potential duplications with articles that are behind a paywall. That is true, and that is a problem. I can't really see a solution for that at the moment. What I do find striking is that only one of the automated tools that we've looked at is actually able to screen across the published record, at least the open access articles. So I think there's a lot of room to maneuver yet. So we have a question here. Once the issue of image alteration or duplication has been discovered, what are the recommended steps regarding communication with the authors? I'm considering how to approach this with a focus on putting researchers at the center. For example, dealing with authors who have published with the publisher before. I'd like to put that to Greta, maybe, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you. So I do actually do this a lot, and but we follow the COPE guidelines, obviously, which request investigations to start with contacting the authors and asking them to address the allegations. One other thing that we do is we make sure that the allegations don't sound too much like allegations, so we just plainly try to start a scientific discussion, a discussion about their data without accusing them of doing anything wrong, because we don't know what happened essentially at this point. So yes, it is an open conversation with the authors, and asking them what happened, asking them to share the data for validation, and then moving on from there. But we involve researchers every step of the way.
Okay.
I would add that one thing we always make sure of doing is that all communication with the author is done through email. They'll very quickly want to pick up the phone and call you, but you can't document conversations on the phone and that. So, you know, I know our ethics manager in the passage, you just ignoring the phone call. And, you know, I see you've tried to call me, please, use, email for correspondence.
Yeah, I
And
think that's very
you said,
interesting that you're saying people are trying to call. I think that's, on the one hand, I think that's quite positive. But yes, it's true. It's difficult to record. You could have I suppose you could have a chat, a video chat and record it. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I just wanted to also point to there's always a question of how much do you reveal to your authors when you found issues, you know, and you've analyzed the images and you've taken screenshots of your analysis. Do you send them to the authors, or do you sort of try and keep that a little bit, you know, closer to your chest? And I guess the answer is that it depends on the case.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I mean, every case is of course different, and it depends on your level of suspicion and so forth. Is that what you would think? Okay.
Yeah.
Then I have another question here. Is there a concern that AI machines will learn from open access journal content and use the images to replicate more realistic looking data images? Maybe Eric can answer that. I don't know. Do you think that's a...
Yeah, I mean, what else are they learning from other than what we're, what a user might be submitting to them? They've got to be pulling from them. So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we want them to learn, but unfortunately,
also, of course,
AI is learning too. We want the programs that are out there potentially for us to use to learn as much as possible. But yeah, it's going to be a never-ending battle.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. And of course, when you're using your AI engine, whichever you're using, it will learn because you can tell it what you like and whether you think something's successful or not, and yeah, you can basically teach what you want the AI to produce for you. But I mean, I suppose this can't be an argument against open access. Another question here, are these tools able to catch clinical images that may have been manipulated or just data manipulation? Maybe, I'm not really sure of the answer. Mike, do you have a potential answer to this?
Yeah, so a clinical image, if you open it up in Photoshop, is still just a collection of pixels. And with some brightness and contrast adjustments, you might be able to find inconsistencies in those pixels that are not natural. And with a good eye or with a piece of AI, you might be able to find the duplications in those pixels. So certainly any medical image that can be rasterized into a pixel-based image can be put in Photoshop or can be run through software, through detection software.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, in the end, it really it takes an experienced eye if you know what an image is supposed to look like, or if you notice things that just look unusual, that just don't sit right. That's when you start asking the questions, and it's a process, isn't it? It's not as if you know the answers first up. Okay, then we have, usually according to COPE, for a published article, one would contact the institution for involvement if the authors are not responsive to the concerns raised. That is, of course, that's what COPE suggests. Jenny, have you had any of this? Do you have any experience you can share here?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have reached out to authors in cases with image manipulation and not gotten a response. But I think generally in our experience, that's been in situations where it's also very hard to verify who the authors are, where they're really affiliated. And so finding someone at an institution to reach out to as a next step hasn't really been feasible. And I think we've generally taken the attitude that if it's a submission and it hasn't been, obviously it's different if it's a published and now retracted article, but if it's submitted content and they disappear, in our eyes, that's sometimes easier than going back and forth and being sent reams of raw data and then having to keep playing that game with them. So we don't generally we haven't had an opportunity to escalate to the institution.
Okay. I mean, I think this also is another strong argument for screening pre-publication rather than leaving it for afterwards, just because authors tend to be, you know, more responsive if you're addressing them about these things before if an article is in, you know, not in production yet. So I'm very aware of the time. Unfortunately, we've nearly run out. I'm just looking through the questions here. Someone says publication speed and integrity review are often pitted against one another. Does anyone have advice to allow room for thorough review? Greta, do you have an opinion on this? I'm sure you do.
I try not to. Yes, we do need to allow time for good quality review, but there are so many other things to discuss about peer review and the state of it right now that we would have to do a whole another webinar.
Yes.
Quick publication times from the research integrity perspective, we do see as somewhat problematic or a potential venue for problems to arise later on.
Yes, but I think, I mean, there is an argument for being thorough and for editorial rigor, and if that takes a little bit more time, if we're publishing more trustworthy science, then I would think this is really a strong argument to spend that little bit of extra time and money, possibly. So we're nearly at the end of this now. I would like to give Joris the opportunity to sort of for final comments, if you'd like to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I'd like to thank you, Jana. A very good discussion, and thank you for the panelists for sharing your information. We're sorry we couldn't go through all the questions, so maybe next time we will have a 1.5 hour session, and I think this topic deserves it. So thank you very much. We will very probably repeat this sometime in the near future because it's an area that is very much developing. So again, thank you all very much for attending and for presenting, and see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.